When he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, "Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly." And he said to him, "I will come and heal him." But the centurion replied, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I, too, am a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to one another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, "Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And to the centurion Jesus said, "Go, let it be done for you as you have believed." And the servant was healed at that very moment. This is God's word. You may be seated. Last week, I emphasized Jesus coming down from the mountain to be near the leper in his proximity. He placed himself in proximity to need and longing. What was shocking about Jesus' healing was that he touched the untouchable. What people would ceremonially and socially label as defiled, Jesus himself touched. Instead of the leper's defilement contaminating Jesus' cleanness was transmitted to the leper. So Jesus' authority was not only over the disease the leper had carried for a long time, but also it was over the social and ceremonial anxiety and taboos that everyone had in mind and in practice. The hurdles that no one could overcome in Jesus' day, Jesus did. The leper understood that this Jesus, who had the true authority to clean him, also had the will to cleanse him. Not only authority, but will to cleanse him. All right, so Jesus wills to cleanse the sick and restore their holistic being, including their social and religious vitality. If the leper was marginalized because of his ceremonially defiled status, the centurion we see today, was marginalized for a different reason. It was because of his race and position. At this time in history, by the way, Rome most likely didn't have Roman-born centurion in Palestine. The best chance is that they recruited them from neighboring territories like Lebanon and Syria. So this centurion was not a Jew. His military position meant that he had to patrol over the Israelites and ensure they didn't rebel against the emperor. So he was not a welcome presence to the Jews, as you can assume. But Jesus marveled at the display of his faith. So we now pivot from touch to speech, from physical contact to spoken command. So in our day, where we like to be experientially rich, this healing miracle may sound less dramatic and less emphatic compared to the one we saw last week. However, to Jesus, the centurion's faith was greatest he says, and none among the Israelites could compare. Jesus marveled at his word. Matthew recorded. I think all of us understand to some degree that this centurion's act was humble and great. Humble and great. At the same time, we don't doubt Jesus' heart like we observed last week. So we assume the healing will take place anyway. So what's the big deal about the centurion's faith? What's the big deal? The question doesn't stay at can Jesus still heal even when he doesn't physically touch? It doesn't stay there, but moves to what kind of faith did this centurion have, right? So the transition from the leper story to the centurion story today tells us one thing. Jesus' authority is not limited by proximity. Jesus' authority is not limited by his proximity. His word carries power even from a distance. His word carries power even from a distance. This naturally opens the door to reflect on how faith functions when we feel far from Jesus. Whether far from God, far from community, and far from hope. But what this centurion also said what this centurion said was more about authority, not just power. He acknowledged Jesus' authority. Let's think about this a bit more. In verse 8 to 9. But the centurion replied, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, go, and he goes. To another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. First, we see his humility in seeking out Jesus. He's a Roman centurion. Jesus is, by his ethnicity, is one of the conquered Jews. But this Roman centurion treats Jesus as if he were of a rank so exalted that the humble soldier's home was not suitable for him. Think about that. But let's go deeper even that. The centurion's expression, what he said in verse 9 was all about authority. It was about authority. He understood something about authority that contributed to his faith. The centurion sees himself as simultaneously under the authority, and as one who exercises authority. Okay? He's under the authority, but also he exercises authority. In the Roman military system, same for today's military system too. All the ultimate authority was vested in the emperor and delegated down the chain of command. Since the centurion was part of that system, when he commanded a foot soldier to come, go, or do something, he wasn't speaking as one man to another, but as a representative of Rome or the emperor. So the centurion was also under the authority of his commanding officer, and so on, eventually going up to the emperor. So when he spoke to the subordinate, it was Rome that was speaking. So in other words, disobeying the centurion wasn't just defying a fellow human. It was a rebellion against Rome, a treason before the emperor, an insult to the empire. I know the military system is somewhat foreign to many of us, but people who have served military understood right away. Higher ranking officers, especially commanders, may spend almost every moment with you in training and in missions. but they are not your peers. When they speak, it's not just them. It's the authority vested in them by the commander-in-chief. So the centurion applies the same logic to Jesus. Somehow he was able to see Jesus as being under God's authority, because Jesus always perfectly confirmed the authority in his actions and words. The centurion was certain that when Jesus exercised authority, it was nothing less than God's authority. So he was able to make the equation. When the centurion speaks, Rome speaks. So when Jesus speaks, God speaks. Jesus' word is invested with God's authority. And what is God's authority? When the centurion commands those under him, things happen. He can order them to come and go and act, do something. He doesn't need to be physically present to oversee every step, because the authority vested in him ensures it will be done. Does it make sense? Likewise, if Jesus truly comes from God, his words are sufficient because they carry God's authority. The same authority that spoke the universe into being from nothing. Jesus doesn't need to be physically present. He doesn't need to check the result. The centurion knew this, that the word and command of Jesus were sufficient. Centurion knew that the word and the command of Jesus were sufficient. Hearing this, Jesus marveled at his word and turned to those following him. Remember, this was in Capernaum. Verse 5 said, when he had entered Capernaum. So they were in Capernaum, where Jesus actually lived. So for that, let's look at Matthew 4, verses 12 to 16. This is the place where Jesus stayed for a few years, I believe. Now, when Jesus heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew into Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he went and lived in Capernaum by the sea, in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali, so that what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light, and for those dwelling in the region and shadow of death, on them a light has dawned. After Jesus was tempted in the desert for 40 days, he went to live in Capernaum upon hearing of John's arrest. It's easy to read and think Jesus was a refugee seeking safety, asylum or something. But that's not what the Gospel says. Matthew is saying that a great light came to dwell among people who were dwelling in darkness, in the shadow of death. Isn't it astonishing that the first person to recognize and identify Jesus for who truly is and what he can do is none but the centurion, a Gentile, not Israelites. What Jesus says to his followers next is even more fascinating, verses 11 and 12 from chapter 8. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. We just read from Matthew 4 that Isaiah's vision says a great light came to Zebulun and Naphtali. Both are the sons of Jacob. One from Leah and one from Bilhah, Rachel's servant. So they represent the people of Israel who lived near the borderlands. But what Jesus is saying is, Rather than these natural sons of Israel reclining at the table, people from east and the west will. They are the ones who at the table. While the sons of the kingdom will be thrown out into the deeper darkness, gnashing and weeping. What a subversive image. Imagine yourself going home and seeing your parents having a banquet with the strangers from your neighborhood, but not reserving a seat for you. And all of this because of the faith displayed by a Gentile, while the crowd merely followed around. In other words, Jesus already knew that his own people, the Israelites, would not acknowledge or welcome him. It would be unexpected, like this centurion on this today's passage, who would come with great faith. Well, maybe it's not so surprising, because throughout the Old Testament, Israel consistently failed to submit to God's authority. What they did was disobedient, disloyalty, faithlessness, and treason. That's all. No wonder they crucified God's own Son at the end of this gospel. That was their attitude toward God all along. So finally, we see how Matthew kind of sandwiched this story, ending it with Jesus exercising his true authority, showing that he is the ultimate authority and the true God. The servant was healed at the moment when Jesus said, "Go and let it be done as you have believed." And it calls to mind creation. When Yahweh God spoke the world into being, the universe into being, he spoke and it was done. Jesus is God, according to Matthew. Jesus has the authority of the true God who created the universe. So the story asks us, when this God-man, Jesus, comes to us, will we respond like the centurion? Or like the people of Zebulun and Naphtali, who saw the light, who saw the great light, and even when the light dawned on them, remained blind. This contrast will run throughout the Gospel of Matthew. There are always followers or the crowds of Jesus, but only a few Matthew will point out. Often the marginalized will truly recognize who Jesus is. So my friends, as we walk through Matthew for next several months, keep this in mind. You will always be either the followers in Capernaum or the centurion. You will be either the followers in Capernaum or the centurion. You can't be both. You can't be neither. You will always be one. But it's your choice, since you heard the message. So Matthew is asking us a question. Are we the crowd following Jesus? Marvel at his word, or astonished at his teaching, asking for visions and miracles all throughout the gospel, be able to experience and see, heard bits here and there and bits, parts, but never apprehend who he is. Can't even imagine who you are dealing with, who you are sitting with, who you are in front of. Or are we going to be like the centurion, acknowledging the authority of Jesus that is vested by God who created the universe? It's our choice. So let's pray. Can we all rise?